Well, hello everybody. Good evening.
Who's alive?
We are live. Facebook says we're live. We're live. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I've had a slight change in philosophy here. Most of the time, you're not going to have blanks to fill in, but I hope you're taking your own little notes on the side. I know a lot of people, and I'm one of those. If there are blanks, I get so focused in, I got to fill in all the blanks that I don't pay attention to the lesson as much as I should. So, anyway. All right, well, let's start with some praise reports.
I just want to praise the Lord. I made it through the summer working over here. So
All right. Okay, Mary?
it's nice distraction.
I had to go to Dumas today, and I took something back to return to the Walmart. First, I stopped at the ladies' room, and I had that cart with my stuff in it, in a bag. Well, when I came out, there was no cart, no nothing. And I thought, what happened? So I talked to the gals and stuff, and they checked and seen somebody else in the store. Because normally nobody touches carts when they're close to the ladies' room. Well, later on, one of the gals talked to the manager, and she came over and talked to me and got some information. He said, we're gonna look on the camera to see what happened. Well, evidently a man came by, grabbed the cart, didn't pay attention, just thought it was a cart. They did catch him out in the parking lot, I think. And she got my stuff back so I could return, which money helps even if it's a small amount.
Right.
And so I was praying to God, walking around checking people's cards, see if they could have it, either accidentally or somebody was being known. And God answered the prayer. He got it back for me.
Good. Others?
I've got a few. My wife and Liz and Stephanie will be here in less than 2 hours.
If I go long tonight, it's Charlie's fault. He's telling me to go long so that they'll come by the church and you all can see the new grandbaby. We don't care about grandma and mama, it's just grandbaby.
I haven't even met the grandbaby yet. So.
Oh, well.
And we had a really, really good day at the store.
All right. Well, those that were not here Sunday were missed, but we had 7 new people. 7 new people. Now, she's not here tonight because she's working, but our new nurse, is working with my wife out of prison, was here Sunday morning with her 4 kids, plus her 2 nieces. So, we're looking forward to starting the children's church starting up on Sunday. We've got the room set up. We are going to start, we're not going to use the faith cases right now. We're going to start something a little easier to kind of work everybody into it. We're going to be doing a lot of VeggieTales. We've got some of the old ones, got a few of the new ones, but some things the kids can relate to. And my wife will show them the video. I'm going to start with some of them that are based on Bible stories, and then she'll talk about the actual Bible story. And I'll be announcing this on Sunday. One of the things we're going to need to understand is when we're done up here, and occasionally I get done a little early, is we don't go rushing downstairs to see what the children are through. When they're done, my wife will bring them up, and I'll let the parents know that. Occasionally, they may go a little longer than we do, because as you know, I'm never long-winded. Okay, I'm very seldom long-winded. I will tell you this. Charlie, a note from message from your wife on the video. Be there in about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Okay. Anyway,
Liz must be driving. Liz must be driving.
Looking forward to that starting this week. The off Sundays that we don't do children's church, my wife and I went down early the other day, And I have found a children's devotion book that's got just one-page devotions, 365 of them, and I'm going to use that. And on the off Sundays, I'm going to do what I did this last Sunday, and have the kids come up and sit and do like a little 5-minute thing with them. And as a matter of fact, what I know from experience is that frankly sometimes the adults get as much out of that as the kids do. Yeah. So you're going to have your ears tuned and your hearts and minds open and ready. Any other praise reports?
Praise the Lord. My mom fell down last night. She did good. I got her up pretty good, and she was all right. She was a little sore, but she was okay today.
All right.
Looks good.
Praise God, she doesn't hurt.
And my husband later.
Prayer request, pray for Christopher. He is, this semester, he is trying to build his own small group that he will lead by himself. And last night, a week ago, he had one guy. Last night, he had nobody show up. And that's just kind of the nature of this. Sometimes you get them coming real consistent. Sometimes you don't. Keep him in prayer that he will continue to reach out and get numbers and talk to guys and continue to try to build it and not get discouraged. I reminded him that the first semester Michael tried to build one, it was really tough. The second semester that he worked on it, it took off. So keep them in prayer. Keep our Portales kids in prayer. They're doing fine. They're seeing some great success on that campus already, which is really cool because it is a new plant. I mean, they're starting from scratch, and it's going well. But keep them in prayer. Other prayer requests.
I have one that was safe travel back from my dad and my sister that were coming back from Amarillo. Also, my dad had to go for a checkup for the doctor. He had 2 appointments, one in Delaware and one in Amarillo.
Okay.
So they're on the way back.
All right. Connie?
Pray for Taylor. She went to the hospital yesterday and lots and lots of pain. They told her, just labor pain, there's nothing. She's anxious.
It's labor pain. It's going to happen.
So they told her.
Unstress yourself up here, and it won't be quite as bad,
That's
right?
what I tell her, but
She's young. We'll just leave it at that, right?
My mom went through something like that when she thought she was going to go in and have a baby. Stayed there 3 days or something, they sent her home.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember when it happened after that.
It happens. Other prayer requests. Continue to pray for everyone in the church family. Pray for Treva, still not doing well. All of us have got family members that we have mentioned that need physical touches in their body. Continue to lift them up.
I have a niece that lives with my mom, and she's got growth on her stomach. We don't know exactly what it is yet, so she's been back and forth to Dallas and here. So we're hoping that now, today was her first appointment with Dallas. But they're not going to do anything till November, but just pray for her. She just really needs help.
Go look at my desk and I have a little highlighter. Can you read it to me? All right, any other prayer requests?
I had another one that I went to the doctor myself and everything went good except my A1C. They said they caught it, that it was hot. I don't know how to get it down. They told me it was
Gotta watch your diet a little more.
Yeah. They
That's-
told me it was 7.7.
Okay, I'm not sure what the
They
numbers
told me it
are.
was has to be like a 5.
You're on 5. You gotta watch what you're eating a little bit more.
Yeah.
And yet here, Friday, Charlie and Eloy and I will be heading out pretty early Friday morning, going to Las Vegas, picking up a U-Haul, and picking up some more upstream resources that day. And they're going to feed us lunch, and if it's what it was last time, a couple times that we've been there and they fed us lunch, it's good Mexican food. And I'm not sure that'll help your A1C. Thank you.
Yeah,
But,
I don't know what I was going to say.
Ice cream is where we go to the schools and give them all that stuff.
Well, we have done the schools in the past. What we're going to do this time, I don't know yet. We're going to, depends on what we get. And I'll actually begin to pray about this because the reality of it is, and I don't understand this, in 18 and a half years, we have done things in this church that we were told, if you'll do this, you'll have growth. It works everywhere. You'll see growth. People will come. And it doesn't work here. Now, I don't know if it's because of our attitude or their attitude or a combination of the two. But things that I was told, Pastor, we promise you if you'll do this, you'll see the growth. It's never worked. So I'm not going to discuss it tonight.
Reason I asked is because I want to do text line in school.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what we get, and we'll figure out where the best place to use it is. Yeah. Any others?
I think a lot of churches are suffering at the same rate. Just need a miracle.
I'm going to tell you the big problem. Too many people sitting in the pews and too many of my peers standing in the pulpit are listening to too much of the cross garbage on the news and YouTube and Facebook and blah, 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 blah. I guarantee you right now, some of you can sit there and tell me more about what's going on in the political scene than you can tell me what's in your Bible right now.
I had a discussion this week with a young man that come in who was wanting to talk Bible stuff, and he was like, I was watching this guy on YouTube, and I was watching this guy on YouTube, and I said, you need to back off the YouTube.
There are some good ones, but
Right.
And, you know, not everything on YouTube is what they're saying. They sound good.
direct him to our church page.
Yeah.
Yeah, because,
I think I helped him
Yeah.
to calm down. He was kind of worked up about what's going on.
I will just tell you what is frustrating to me as a pastor is I'm a member of a few ministers' pages on Facebook. And some of the stuff my fellow pastors put out there and ask about, I'm like, guys, you're not running a business, you're not running a corporation, you're not the CEO. I mean, technically, yes, we are an incorporation. We are Clayton Assembly of God, Clayton, New Mexico, Clayton Assembly of God Church, Clayton, New Mexico, Incorporated. I am the president of the corporation. The members of the board and a couple others are our board of directors, all for the state thing so that we can get tax exemption, we can get purchases and stuff. But this cannot be run like a business, and too many of them are wanting to run their churches too much like a business. You gotta have good business practices, but it's not a business. I mean, I see things on there like, oh my goodness, do you have a written policy for your staff as to how much time they can take off? Do you count your staff's 40 hours a week? Do they get to count the times they're in service as part of their 40 hours, or is it 40 hours plus service? And I just want to beat my head on the wall and go, guys, it's not a business. It is a church. It is ministry. Some weeks, I don't put in 40 hours. Other weeks, it's a lot more than 40 hours. I thank God you guys are not the type like some that have literally had their pastors punching the clock. Okay? I have in the last many years, there's been more than once I've asked a fellow pastor, hey, why don't we take about 2 hours this morning and let's run out and play 9 holes of golf just to spend time together. Man, I'd sure love to, but man, I'm not allowed to be out of the office.
I mean,
Folks, we got to do ministry. And ministry is not done always within this building. A lot is done here, but a lot's done out there as well.
yeah,
We
more
need to
stuff
understand
out
that.
there than in here.
Yes.
most of the time.
Anyway, more prayer requests.
I would like prayer. I know I have the surgery scheduled, but I'd like to have it a little bit earlier so that,
So pray that Georgia will exercise patience and get her cataract surgery done when the doctor told her to. I can tell you, if you got on the schedule, you're very fortunate because, yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
out there.
I just don't want to be driving over there during bad weather.
Well, the thing of it is, when you go to have that done, you're going to have to have somebody with you because they won't let you walk out of the surgery place unless you have a driver.
Yeah, I know it.
Okay. When we took Dad to his last one, a guy from his church took him to one. We took him to the last one, walked in, went to check in. They said, "Do you have a driver here?" We said, "Yeah, we're right here." You will drive him? Yes, when we leave here, I will be driving, not him. Okay, they signed me in, so.
Well,
When you get cataract surgery, they will not let
Oh,
you
yeah.
drive.
I have,
I'm very fortunate, I have good pastor friends.
You'll do good. I'm gonna ask my wife to open in prayer, and then we're gonna jump into the study tonight.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we praise you and thank you for this beautiful day that you blessed us with. Thank you for this time that we can come together and we learn the word, Father God, draw us closer to you, Lord God. You've heard all these requests, Lord. I pray that you work in your perfect will and in your perfect timing, Lord God. I pray that you would meet each and every need that was spoken and even the ones that were not spoken, Father God. And we give you all the praise and the glory and honor, Lord. I pray that you open up our hearts, open up our minds to receive your word tonight. Help us to learn of you even more deep. In that precious name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
amen.
All right. In this study, as you know, part of the time we've been covering in one lesson thousands of years, hundreds of years. Tonight, we're going to cover less than 25 years.
Well,
And later on the map that you have there of Abraham's journeys, I have a note there underneath it. You see the yellow line path? That shows Abram's journey from Ur up to Haran, and then from Haran back down into Canaan, all the way over to Egypt, and of course he went back. Later, if you want to grab this yellow highlighter and color in just the last little bit down there between Tanis and Memphis, you can do that. That would be down the bottom left-hand corner of Egypt, okay? So I have my wife grab this for me. So if you want to do that later, right after we finish, you can come up with the highlighter and do that. And by the way, this is Memphis, Egypt that we'll be talking about, not Memphis, Tennessee, where my wife and I
That's
took
what
a
I
little
wanted
trip.
to say.
Yes. Yeah, different Memphis.
wow.
All right, tonight, last week we left off basically at Genesis 12, verse 5. Terah, Abram's father, has lived to be 205 years old, and he died in Haran. And then God reestablishes the call to Abram and says, now leave your father, leave everything that's there, and you go on into Canaan. Okay? How old is Abram at this time?
Is it 130?
75.
He's 75. Sharp.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Okay, he's 75. Now, we're not sure how old he was when God originally called him to leave his family, to leave Ur of the Chaldees, and make this journey. And his father decided they would do this and go to Canaan, but they got as far as Haran and stopped. Let's just back up a minute. Why do you think they stopped in Haran? Why did Terah, Abram's father, want to stop in Haran?
I think he had second thoughts about going, leaving.
Okay, I think he probably got there and it was another metropolitan city like Ur was. It was familiar, it was still his people. And the more he thought about Canaan, the less he liked it. So he settled. You know, we've got to be careful in our own lives sometimes. God's going to call us to make a move into an area of life. Not always a physical move, but a change sometimes. And we get part way and we get comfortable and we stop. Okay? We've got to go all the way. So here he is, they're in Haran. And now we're going to pick it up tonight. And let's go ahead and read the entire scripture. We're going to start read Genesis 12, beginning at the beginning of that chapter, through Genesis 13:8. And that's where we're going to stop. And let's actually go ahead and pick it up in verse 4.
So Abram was 75 when he was in Haran,
75 when he left Haran.
when he left Haran.
Well,
Okay, Genesis 12, beginning verse 4. So Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Who was Lot?
His
Nephew. Who was Lot's dad?
dad's brother.
What was the name of Lot's dad? Hint, it's the same name as the city they were living in, Haran. Okay? Lot was Haran's son. Haran died in Ur. So when Grandpa decided to leave and some of the family to head out from Ur, Lot, of course, went with them. Again, keep in mind, based on what most Bible teachers and scholars, not all, but most say, Lot was probably younger than Abram, but not by a lot, no pun intended there. He was a few years younger. A lot of us that grew up in Sunday school with those wonderful little flannel graph pictures, they always showed Lot being this very young man. And part of what we're going to talk about tonight, we always said, well, Lot was this young whippersnapper that was just totally disrespectful of the old man. But in all honesty, I don't think that was the case. I don't think Lot was that much younger. Personally, I'm going to say I really think he was probably less than 10 years younger than me. Just a guess, but it's an educated guess. So Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. And he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all of the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. And Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Morah at Shechem. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, plural, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent, and Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. And as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. Well, let's stop there a minute. How old was Sarai when they left Haran? 65. Again, a lot of us grew up either in Sunday school or our Bible story books, and they show Sarai as this very almost decrepit, ancient-looking woman.
No, not necessarily.
Now, do you think she was this ancient, decrepit-looking woman and Abram was just being a good husband? Or do you think she still had retained much of her beauty?
I think
She
it would take
her
most
beauty.
I think she had retained much of her beauty. And the story will bear that out. All right? One of the craziest things, the other day I was on the phone with my brother. And in October, my brother turns 51. And in January, I turned 60. Now, I don't know how most of you feel about the age that you're at, but the honest to goodness truth is, I don't, in my mind, I'm not 60. I'm not even close to 60 in my mind.
I understand that.
You understand it. In fact, I catch myself.
I feel the same way.
We were at like Sam's Club the other day, and I saw this old guy trying to lift these cases of water, and I thought, man, maybe I should go help the old guy. And I looked at him and I thought, wait a minute, we're not the same age, forget it. You're only as old as you feel. And as my great-granddad Green used to say, some days I feel really old and some days I don't. All right. So as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. We're going to talk about that in a minute. There is a little more to that culturally than what we comprehend today. When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that she was a very beautiful woman, and when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, men servants and maidservants, and camels. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. What have you done to me? He said, why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh gave orders about Abram and his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. All right. Let's go ahead and get the first 18 verses, then we'll go through our itinerary. Yes. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. Okay, I told you that when they left Haran, he had a lot of possessions. What were most of those possessions? Animals, livestock. Now we find out not only did Pharaoh give him more livestock, he also gave him an abundance of silver and gold. Okay? And from the Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now, Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. See, this is why I don't think Lot was this young whippersnapper. That's why I think Lot was fairly close to Abram in age. He had already accumulated almost as much in possessions. Okay? But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herdsmen and the herdsmen of Lot. And the Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers. Okay, are they brothers?
No.
Yes and no. They're not brothers as in my brother and I are. They're brothers meaning we're relatives, we're family. Okay, again, this is one of those little things that some people try to use to say, see, the Bible contradicts itself. That says Lot was his nephew. Now he calls him brother. See, it's wrong. No. Use some common sense.
It says close relatives.
Yeah. Use some common sense, folks. I mean, Charlie and I, and Eloy and I, we're not blood related, but we're brothers. Okay? Verse 9, is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt toward Zoar. This is before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. And Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. We're going to find out more about them in another couple of lessons or so. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had parted from him, lift up your eyes from where you are and look north and south, east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. And I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring can be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So Abram moved his tents and went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. All right. In your notes, and we're just going to walk our way through this, and we're going to talk about it. Here is the itinerary of Abram's early travels once he left Haran and entered Canaan. First he went to Shechem. And we find it when he got to the spot named Shechem, and you'll find it there on your map. A little left of center, you see the word Canaan, and you'll see Shechem near the Mediterranean Sea. You'll see that on your map there?
Yep.
Okay? So he travels from Haran and finally goes through the land of Canaan, makes his way down to this area of Shechem. We're told there he built an altar. If you pay close attention through the book of Genesis and also through the book of Exodus when they were in the wilderness, oftentimes many of these patriarchs, when they got to a location, what did they do? They built an altar. Why? One was so they could worship. There was also a second reason. Their altars were not just for worshiping God.
It was to mark their place.
It was a memorial to remind them of that place should they come there again.
And the name they gave it.
And the name they gave it. Now understand, when Moses wrote this, he's giving the names that they were called by in his time. Some of these places might have had a different name when Abram was there, but Moses is writing so that when we read this, its names will recognize it. Its names that the people he was writing to will recognize. So he comes to Shechem and he builds an altar. All right? Then from there, he travels on a little further south. He goes to the hills that are just east of Bethel. So he has Bethel on the west, Ai on the east. Notice what he does there, what it says. It says he pitched his tents. Now, what does that tell you?
It's gonna stay a while.
He stayed a while.
Yeah, stayed a while.
All right. At Shechem, he came, he built an altar. I'm sure they camped, but I don't think they set up a permanent type camp. Whereas when they get to Bethel, he pitches his tents. Notice he does that first. Why do you think he did that first?
Provide for his family.
Okay, he's taking care of his family. All right. One of the best pieces of advice I was given by my pastor of my home church when I got ready to go into ministry full time and get married was he said, in his day, when he was training for ministry, they were taught, if you'll take care of the church and the ministry, God will take care of your family. And he said, that's wrong. He says, your family must come before the church and the ministry. And he shared things with me about that some of it I already knew. He shared a little bit about his family. He says, he says, if I could go back and do anything over, I would spend more time with my children and less time at the church. Okay? And I don't remember, you two may not remember, but were you both here the first Saturday we came and visited with the congregation? We didn't even preach for you. You were there? Do you remember one of the things I told you all that day?
Church.
There,
Your family came for.
yeah, there was two things I told you all that day. One was WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. I said, you don't let me now, you're not going to let me in 10 years. Well, now it's been 18 and a half.
Wow.
And second.
If you don't like me by now, I'm sorry. And the second was I said, you need to understand my priorities. It's my relationship with Christ, my wife, my children, my extended family and my church family, and then number 5 is the work of the ministry. And my boys grew up knowing that they always came ahead of the ministry, except rare occasions where a ministry, something was of such dire emergency crisis, it had to jump up to ahead of them and their mother. But I'll tell you, as soon as the crisis was over, boom, those priorities got changed. I will tell you, most people that are trying to serve the Lord, you're not seeing what you want from God because your priorities are out of whack. A lot of people would say, Abram should have built the altar, then pitched his tent. No. He took care of the family,
And
then he built the altar. But notice what he did here after he built the altar. Well, he didn't just build the altar as a memorial to God. It says he did what? He called on the name of the Lord. Okay? Then he headed down to the Negev. Now, the Negev is not listed on your map, but the Negev would be the area down towards where it says Beersheba and a little bit south of that. Negev is a Hebrew word that means dry. It was the southern part of Canaan. It was the wilderness area. All right? You will find the Negev talked about various times throughout the Old Testament especially. When David was running from Saul, part of the time, he would go hide out in the Negev, in the wilderness. Okay? While they're in this dry area in the Negev, severe famine hit the entire land of Canaan. What is famine? Lack of food.
Yep.
Not enough food. All right? Do you notice something missing from the next part of his journeys? Where does he go when the famine hits? He goes to Egypt. Do you see anything there that says that God called and spoke to him and told him to go to Egypt during this? Doesn't say in the Bible, does it?
No.
I really believe if it had really been God's will for him to go to Egypt, it would say, and God spoke to Abram and said, take Sarai, your wife, and Lot, and your family possessions, and go to Egypt until the famine is over. But he didn't wait for God's direction.
No.
You ever run ahead of God?
Yeah.
It's not pleasant, is it?
No.
All right. But while he is in Egypt, we can learn some things from the story. Number 1, we learn the true importance of Abram And it is seen by the fact that he comes to the attention of Pharaoh's court. Pharaoh's officials, or some translations say Pharaoh's princes, they notice it. Again, reminding you that this is not a little band of a dozen people traveling around with their little tent. Or to put it in modern terms, this isn't 5 or 6 little hippie types riding around in their VW bus, okay? This is a great, massive number of people. It's a complete town of people that move from place to place and live in tents. They don't build houses, they don't build a city, but he's got lots of people. So when he shows up in Egypt, and we know he went to the capital at some point, that's when he encountered Pharaoh, and at that time the capital was probably in Memphis, not Tanis. So you've got to understand again, Abram is a man of wealth, he is a man of importance. He's not just wandering around the desert in this uninhabited land with a few little people, all right? The Pharaoh is thought to either be Shoshenq or Khufu, and others think it might have been one of the shepherd kings that ruled Egypt for a time. Now, real quickly, you don't even have to bother taking notes on this. There is a point there in Egypt's history where other Semitic people, which means they would have been somehow kind of related to Abram and his people, they were shepherd people because they came from Canaan. A lot of Canaanites were shepherds. And they conquered part of Egypt for a while and put their people on the throne. Eventually they were conquered and kicked out, and the Egyptians took back over. We don't actually know for sure which Pharaoh it was. I Googled and I came up with one thing. I thought, oh, there it is. Now we know it's Pharaoh. Oh, wait a minute. This one says this. That's reliable. But that's a reliable source. Oh, this reliable source says that. Okay, we don't really know. All right. Now let's talk about what happens. Abram gets ready to go into Egypt, and he says to Sarai, look, babe, you're still looking good. And as soon as they see you, they're going to kill me and take you for one of them. It's going to take you for their wife. So you tell them that you're my sister. Was that a lie?
No.
No.
She was his half-sister. They have the same father. Terah is her father. Different moms. Not uncommon back then. This is something I did not fully understand, and if I'd heard this, I'd forgotten. In the context of those cultures, the sister wife was held in higher esteem than a wife. Abram's whole concept and thinking was, I'm going to rely upon cultural norms and all, because if I tell them you're my sister wife, they'll respect me more and probably not harm you either. Now, it doesn't make sense to us, does it? It does not make sense at all.
No, it don't.
But he did to them.
Wow.
And of course, we know the whole story. Pharaoh was pointed out to Pharaoh, hey, this man has come in with all this stuff. He says, that's his sister. Pharaoh sees her. He goes, yeah, let me look here. Okay. Yeah, let me check the credit card. Yeah, I can afford another wife. One more woman going to Walmart every week.
Don't forget the restaurants.
Right?
No, they didn't do restaurants. They had cooks that cooked for them all the time. So he brings her in. Now, again, keep in mind, we read this very quickly. We read it as though he went, yeah, she's hot, bring her in.
Right?
Oh no, I might be attacked. Oh, you lied to me. And we read it like it happened quickly. One thing pointed out that anytime a woman was to be brought into a king's harem, even this far back in the Egyptian, there was a process of preparation. She had to go through beauty preparation to make her attractive to an Egyptian. It is during that time. Now see, I saw two things. One deal that I saw said, oh, you know, that Pharaoh must have actually went ahead and he had his way with her. Another one says, probably not. God would not have allowed that to happen to the mother of the promised child. But she went through during the process, all of a sudden Pharaoh and his household began to experience these sicknesses. And how are they determining this? He calls Abraham in and says, she's not your sister, is she? Well, yeah, she is. We have the same dad, different mom. But she's also your wife, right? Yeah. He goes, how could you do this to me? Why didn't you just tell me she was your wife to begin with? Notice what happens. Pharaoh then bestows upon Abram, not only gives him back his wife, but he says, there's camels, there's donkeys, there's sheep, there's cattle, which is in the treasury. Here's gold, here's silver. Now look, man, would you please just go away so nobody else in my household or my court makes this mistake and brings devastation upon us?
So he was doing that because it kept God from, hopefully God wouldn't.
He did that so that he was trying to appease Abram's God and Abram himself. All right? So, from there, he goes back to the Negev for a while. Then he goes back to Bethel, where he'd been before. What did he find when he got there?
He found the altar that was.
Found his altar.
Yep.
Found his memorial. And it is here that him and Lot have to part ways due to their individual abundance of wealth and possession. Now again, when I was growing up, this was always taught that Lot was this young whippersnapper nephew, and that he should have told, when Abram says, look, where do you want to go? You want to go this way? I'll go that way. You want this way? I'll go that way. Your choice. And I was always taught that Lot was this young whippersnapper that just kind of disrespected Abram. I personally don't think that Lot was that much younger. I think they were age-wise close enough in age that yes, Abram was still the patriarch of the family, but Lot was close enough in age that Abram was treating him as an equal. Lot chooses the fertile area of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, let's talk about that a minute. It already tells us that Sodom and Gomorrah were full of evil wickedness. Where had they been staying most of the time as they traveled through Canaan? What kind of areas?
The dry desert.
Rural.
Yeah.
Out where they had room to set up this massive tent city and room for their animals to feed and be taken care of. And yet they've got so much that even where they're at, it's not enough room. Because not only are they trying to survive side by side, but it tells us that there are some Canaanites and Perizzites living around them as well. It's a crowded area. All right? Again, remember, it's not just this little tiny group of people inhabiting the earth. The world's population has exploded. There's people everywhere.
Right.
Why do you think Lot chose to go near the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah? Now stop and remember their history. Raised in Ur of the Chaldeans, we talked about that was a prosperous city. Then they went with Terah to Haran. That also was a prosperous city. They've gone and spent time now in Egypt near Memphis, which was the capital city. Why do you think Lot chose to go? Not only was it well watered because of the Jordan, but why else do you think he wanted to go near Sodom and Gomorrah?
Because it was a metropolitan city.
It was a city. Lot liked having his livestock and his animals, but he wanted the chance to go to the city. He wanted to go to eat out once in a while. He wanted to go to the mall, and he wanted to be able to go run over to Home Depot or Lowe's to get what he needed, because out there where they were at, they didn't have a good hardware store. Okay, you get the picture? Apparently Lot wanted to. In fact, we'll find out later as we go through some of this and you know the story. Lot ends up living in the city. Lot's not even living out in the tent city with his animals. He moves into the city. Okay? So from there, Lot goes to the fertile area around Sodom and Gomorrah, Abram goes back to Hebron, to the trees of the great tree of Mamre at Hebron, and there what does God happens? God renews the covenant, and Abram builds an altar. God says to him, hey, look, this may, and I'm paraphrasing, this may be your home base, but here's the deal, Abram. You walk to the north, you go journey to the south, you journey to the west, you journey to the east, and every place you put your foot and all that you see will one day belong to your offspring. So he renews the covenant. All right? Now, that's where we're going to stop with the biblical. Again, we're looking at less than 25 years old. I did that for a reason. We're going to look next lesson. We're going to look at some other, when we get to Genesis 14, we'll start there next lesson. We're going to see how part of the reason why we know Abram was not just this little tiny camp of people. And we're going to look at some of the people groups that he interacted with, okay? Which will be mentioned briefly. All right, during this early time of Abram's journey into Canaan, bronze was being used to manufacture many items. Now, if you go back a lesson or two, we talked about iron was being used, and iron came after bronze. But the reality of it is, sometimes those that sign these times, the Bronze Age came before the Iron Age, but they overlapped. And I don't know exactly how much. Let's just say that from around the time frame we think Abram was here in Canaan originally, bronze was already definitely in use, and iron came into use at some point afterwards. All right? Here's what we know about Canaan. Now, there are some historical documentations out there that Canaan was considered by those in Mesopotamia and those in Egypt. Canaan was, if I can put it in terms of Willis, Canaan was the redneck country.
Country folk.
They were the country folk. And then, but what was worse was, they had the reputation, whether it was an honest reputation or not, the reputation of Canaan was that they ate raw meat, they sacrificed their kids, and they were just horrible, wicked, backwards people. Now, is that partly true? Yes. Why do you think God eventually wanted those people to be destroyed? Because he gave them over 400 years to repent, and they didn't do so. And some of this they did. Their gods, which I didn't list here, their gods included the Baal, the Asherah, and others that we read about all through the Old Testament. And why is it important to know about the Baals and the Asherahs? From a biblical standpoint.
Because they sacrifice children.
What was it that got Israel in trouble as a nation?
They worship it.
They tried to incorporate the worship of the Baal and the Asherahs in with the worship of the one true God.
Yeah.
And that all goes back to the Canaanites. Okay? All right, during this time, here's what we know about the entire land of Canaan. Which one do we call it today? Israel, the Holy Land, that area, okay? It was a fertile area. Yes, there was the Negev in the south, it was the desert, but for the most part it was a very fertile area. Some of the crops they grew would be grain, which would include what? Probably. Wheat,
Grains,
oats,
Barley.
barley.
grain.
Yeah. I don't know what. They grow all kinds of grains. What do you make with grains?
Bread.
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 Cereals were not actually, I don't know, I guess they probably made something that was kind of like a cereal, but not like we think of today. Right?
Unless you're some
Didn't they make the bread or whatever, something like a tortilla?
There's all kinds of breads that were made. Some of them are flat like tortillas. Others are loaves. That's why, this is my personal opinion, okay? Diets that tell you to have no bread whatsoever, I find it difficult to buy into because Christ called himself the bread of life, and every culture has some form of bread. Now, should you be careful and not eat too much of it? Yes.
Did they use a lot of salt in it?
I have no idea, I wasn't
I
there.
mean,
I
that's
don't
why
know.
they're doing it now, because it's probably too much salt.
Well,
That puts high blood pressure.
I don't know.
Well, yeah,
All right, they grew grain, grapes, figs, olives, legumes, or legumes. What are those?
Beans,
Beans, what else?
Peas,
Peas,
peanuts.
lentils, okay, those are legumes, or legumes. Onions, cucumbers, and a whole lot of other crops were being grown in abundance. They were agriculture. Remember, Egypt had some agriculture along the Nile, but they also had big cities. They produced goods. Mesopotamia, the same way. They had farming, part of the Fertile Crescent, but they also had big cities and produced a lot of goods. And both Egypt and Mesopotamia had come under the rule of a single government. Okay? All right, the people in Canaan at that time, in spite of the reputation we talked about, they were a sophisticated agricultural and urban people. They did have cities. However, unlike Egypt and Mesopotamia, they were not a unified people across the region, but were ruled by city-state kings, as we'll see in our next lesson and in Genesis 14. No one had actually come into that part, into Canaan, and got all the people to come together to be overseen by a single government. Each city had its own king who ruled his city and so much of the surrounding area and land and territory around his city only. In this part of our lesson, the Bible mentions only two people groups in Canaan in this part of the story. It says the Canaanites. That is actually a catch-all term for the many other individual people groups that we'll read about in other chapters of Genesis. And it mentions the Perizzites, which is most likely a designation given to the people groups that lived in the rural and agricultural areas rather than the cities. In other words, they was the country folk. They were referred to as Perizzites. Okay? Also around this time in history, chariots were developed. All right. What was the great thing about chariots being developed?
they were on wheels,
Okay?
and they were pulled by horses, and they were fighting tools.
We oftentimes think of the chariots being used in battle, and they were to a point, but some of the stuff I looked at said, in all honesty, many of the armies didn't use chariots in battle as much as we'd like to think they did, as Hollywood portrays it, because they found that man on horseback was actually more effective than man in chariot being pulled by horses. The chariots were used most for recreation and entertainment and like going out hunting, that kind of thing. More so, they were used in battle some, but they were used a lot more in these other ways.
They raced with them a lot, didn't they?
They did in time, like in Ben-Hur. In fact, one of the things I read mentioned that, said they were more likely, eventually chariots came to be used more for like chariot races and entertainment than in actual battle.
And weren't something about the walls that were wide enough for the,
There was, the walls of Jericho were wide enough that two chariots could be driven around them side by side. Okay? Something else around that time, cats were being domesticated. And in Egypt, they were trained to kill snakes. And in Egypt, not only did they train the cats to kill snakes, but the cat was one of the representations of one of their many gods, possibly more than one. In fact, in some of the tombs that they've uncovered of pharaohs and wealthy people, they have found mummified cats, so that that person could take their pets with them into the afterlife. Another kingdom / people group that was influential during this time frame, and it spreads out more than this little less than 25-year span, were the Phoenicians. They were located in what is now modern-day Lebanon. The Phoenicians improved boat and ship design, which led to greater sea travel, exploration, and trade. What do you think the first boats that man ever built, what do you think the first boats looked like? Possibly a dugout type log as a canoe,
Canoe.
maybe several logs tied together to form a raft.
Yeah.
But as time went by, they began to figure out ways to make them a little bigger, a little more sturdy, a little more safe. And with each improvement, that just meant they could go a little bit further, a little bit further. Trade could happen. Let's build this boat big enough that we can have our people on there and have room to work. Plus, we can take goods now, put them on the boat and take them over there. Instead of coming the long route around on land, we can just cut straight across the Mediterranean or wherever they were at. They are also credited with developing the first symbol-based alphabet that improved on the pictograph writings of Egypt and other ancient languages. And there is a picture there on the bottom page of the Phoenician alphabet. You will be given a test next week and need to write it out in full. No, I'm kidding.
I'm going to Arizona next week.
I had a hard time Spanish
I
spelling.
had a dictionary.
Is that first one that looks,
I lost it, I don't know whatever happened to it.
is that first one that looks like a
Under,
case?
in the back cover, the back cover, inside the cover and the back page was the alphabet we use plus Greek, Hebrew, Russian, all the different.
All the different alphabets.
Oh,
To show, I mean, it was like a dozen different alphabets in there, that was pretty cool.
Well, and that's exactly what I wrote here. The Phoenician alphabet influenced virtually every Western civilization alphabet in history. Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, Arabic, and even English. Now, don't try to use this as a direct correlation to ours. It influenced.
Yes.
Okay, remember a few lessons ago, we looked at the ancient Chinese alphabet, which is not what they use today, but it was pictures. They represent concepts and ideas, and words with pictures that they put together. Egyptian hieroglyphics, same thing, pictures. Well, the Phoenicians got smart, and I don't know how long it took them to develop. Instead of drawing all these thousands of pictures, why don't we just come up with a few symbols? And I didn't even count these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 19, 20, 21. They have 22 letters in their alphabet. How many do we have in ours?
26.
How many is in the Spanish alphabet?
24,
24.
It's less than
No, it's
23.
more.
Let's see.
It's more.
Oh.
Got check.
20.
Would be 28?
I think it's 28 or 29.
Yeah.
I think it's
Because you got the N with the tilde.
Oh, yeah.
Alphabet,
You've
said,
got
check,
the
A,
different
A,
symbols.
I checked E, I used to know the whole
What they
alphabet.
call Enya, O, K,
Ella,
I
ella.
had a hard time saying it. I had a hard time.
W, X, Y, Z.
Wow.
I used to know the alphabetic delta gamma. I used to know, I had to memorize the Greek one, but I can't remember. But as you see here, again, think about how long ago this was. We're talking somewhere about 4,000 years ago, give or take, when they developed this, and yet it influences what we still use today. Okay? Why is understanding this ancient time so important? Because the reality of it is, both what is in the Bible and what was going on in history is still influencing what we do today. Okay? So again, I hope that you understand, we read this story about Abram and we say, well, shame on Abram for putting Sarai in this position. Well, the reality of it is, if you go back and you study history in the cultural context, what Abram was doing was not, so I've actually had it taught to me when I was younger, well, Abram really didn't love Sarai that much because look there, he put her out there so if anything bad happened, it happened to her and not him. No, come to find out, if you study the historical and cultural context, he actually was doing what he thought would cause her to be more respected and elevated in the eyes of the Egyptians than if he had just said, "This is just my wife." It doesn't make sense to us. It's not our culture.
Right?
But here's the thing. We don't have to understand what they did. We just have to recognize the fact that that's what they did and why they did it. All right? All right, any questions, thoughts, comments?
That K, is that just a comment?
I don't know.
It's just, that's what it looks like.
Don't try to take that and translate it to an English alphabet. It's not a direct correlation. It's not a direct correlation. Okay? I will tell you, when I had to take language classes for my
By the way,
bachelor's,
that symbol that you're looking at there, Mary, is actually the original design for the letter A.
This, oh.
yeah, if you turn that
The original letter A was a sideways symbol.
sideways symbol. See, here's the thing. I had to memorize both the Greek and the Hebrew alphabet. The Greek alphabet I did okay with. The Hebrew alphabet, I finally kind of memorized it at one time, but it was very difficult
Now,
to do.
just remember, CH is pronounced.
Look at the L. Look at the L.
didn't know that.
I had hard enough
A CH is not
understanding
pronounced
Spanish,
check.
let alone
Yes.
anything else.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
that's
Any other
Like
questions?
the name in there, you're pronouncing Shechem, should be pronounced Shechem.
Yeah, and there's some of those languages in the Middle East in this day, as I've heard say, you got to get a lot of saliva going, okay?
Yeah.
We'll stick with the English pronunciation.
Mouth dry.
Yeah, you can't do it when your mouth's dry. All right, if anybody wants to take on their map, and I'll tell you what, I'll open this to my map if you want to see the little area that I colored in down here between Tanis and Memphis, you can do that. Any other questions on what we looked at tonight? Does that give you a little clearer understanding of what was going on when Abram went into Egypt? All right. See, there's things that we read the Bible story, and if that's all we read, we get a very distorted idea of what was going on if we don't study the history and the context. Yes, Abram was wrong. He should have trusted God. He should have never gone to Egypt in the first place, I feel.
Right?
And he should not have concocted the idea of giving in to cultural norms to protect Sarai. He should have trusted God. Let's face it. He should have said,
Charlie, which northeast, southwest, what?
there you go. He should have simply thought to himself, you know what? God's given me the promise. This is my wife. He says, she's going to give me a son of promise. And listen, if God's going to give you something that is of promise, He's not going to let the means of that promise being fulfilled be violated.
Yeah.
Wow.
Does that make sense? Abram should have thought that. I mean, he's been walking with God now. He trusted God enough to leave Haran and come into Canaan. He should have trusted God to have kept him safe. All right?
Do you think Lot knew that Sodom and Gomorrah was evil?
Yeah, because the entire land of Canaan, they all worshipped idols. And Lot has been exposed to what the one true God would do because of being with Abram all these years.
Yeah.
And one big city isn't big.
Yeah.
Any others? Charlie, dismiss us in prayer.
Father God, thank you for this lesson. Thank you for making things a little clearer for us, understanding Abram's travels and why he did what he did. Lord, I pray that we learn from this lesson, that we take it to heart, and Lord, we ask you to be with us as we go out into the world, to be the light and to guide people into your home. We ask this in your wonderful name. Amen.
Amen. We set the tables.